Dear students, today I am going to talk about the evolution of the concept of international human rights. The idea of rights and duties of citizen is as old as the concept of the state. One may find its origin in ancient Greek political system and in Roman law in Europe, Confucian system in China, the Code of Hammurabi, the Islamic political system in the Muslim world, and the Panchayat system in India. To have a better understanding of the concept of rights, it is essential to analyze the histories. Domestic concept of human rights. The glorious revolution, the American, French and Russian Revolution represent the domestic origin of the idea of human rights. Although they were taken place within the national context, they had great influence on the struggles for human rights elsewhere. Besides, many international developments have also been undertaken during the last 3 centuries that might have made human rights truly a universal phenomenon. Glorious Revolution. As the British monarch enjoyed absolute powers of governance in medieval times, and their rules were characterized by arbitrary exercise of their powers, nobility and clergy resented this with an objective to create a political space and the right for themselves. The nobility began asserting their identity and significance in the political system. This assertion of nobility can be clearly seen in the signing of Magna Carta and the Glorious Revolutions of 1688. In 1215, King John of England was forced to sign Magna Carta, a document erroneously called as the first instrument of liberties of English citizens. In reality, it was merely a compromise on the distribution of powers between the king and his nobles. It gave certain concessions to clergy, landlords and nobles, and consequently restricted the powers of the king to the extent of those concessions concerned. In the 17th century in England, there were conflicts and tensions between Parliament and the king over the arbitrary rules. These struggles led to the Glorious Revolutions of 1688. These revolutions is also known as bloodless revolutions. James II was forced to abdicate the throne, fearing for his life. The king fled the country, passed the Bill of Rights in 1689. The bill imposed restrictions on the powers of the king. It declared illegal the claim of suspending and the dispensing powers of the crown. It prohibited the levying of taxes or the maintenance of standing army in peacetime by the crown without parliamentary consent. The bill provides that excessive bail ought not to be required, nor excessive fine imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. It further provided that jurors ought to be duly impaneled and returned, and that all grants and promises of fines and forfeitures of particular persons before convictions are illegal and void. American Revolution. The American Declaration of Independence, that is 1776, and the Virginia Declaration of Rights, that is 1776, are two significant developments which represent domestic origin of the concept of rights in USA. Being dissatisfied with in the British Parliament, the Americans waged a war to liberate their country from the colonial rule of Great Britain. The founding fathers of America were greatly influenced by the experience of glorious revolutions of England and the social contract and natural rights theories of Locke and the French philosophers who inspired French Revolution. The American Declaration of Independence, which was drafted by Thomas Jefferson, contains numerous ideas of human rights, such as all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, including right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. However, it should be noted that this document contained high-sounding ideals of the protection of life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. They were clearly inadequate as a catalogue of individual rights, which the state has obliged to protect. The Virginia Declaration had a great influence on the drafters of U.S. Constitution. Subsequently, in 1791, a Bill of Rights containing a list of guaranteed rights was included in the Constitution through a number of constitutional amendments. Some of the better known amendments are the First Amendment, which provides for freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom of expression, and the right of assembly. The Fourth Amendment provides for protection of individuals against unreasonable search and seizure. And the Fifth Amendment establishes the rule against self-incrimination and the right to due process of law. The 13th Amendment, adopted after the Civil War, abolishes the practice of slavery. It is worth noting that no rights have ever been removed or abridged by the Congress. Next is French Revolution. While the American Declaration of Independence and the rights sought to end the colonial rule by establishing the notion of popular sovereignty and self-determination, the French Revolution sought to demolish the old absolutist monarchy and to establish a new democratic government. The French Revolution was inspired by philosophers like Montesquieu, Rousseau, and Voltaire. After the Revolution, the National Assembly of France adopted the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. It introduced three noble concepts in political science, that is, liberty, equality, and fraternity. It was truly international in its appeal and inspired revolutionary and democratic movements in almost every country of Europe and Central and South America, and later in Asia and Africa. Next is Bolshevik Revolution. The Socialist Revolution in Soviet Russia introduced socio-economic dimensions to the concept of rights, which were neglected in the events as well as in the documents of English, American, and the French revolutions. While the three revolutions emphasized the first generation, that is, civil and political rights, the October revolutions of Russia popularized socio-economic rights such as the right to work, social security, protection of the family, right to adequate standard of living, right to education, health, and right to join trade unions. These are the second generation of positive rights. International development. Traditionally, international law was defined as the law governing relations between nation-states exclusively. This implied that only states and not the individuals were the subjects of international law, with the creation of international organizations like the League of Nations and the United Nations. The nature of international law has dramatically changed. The League of Nations created mandates for minority systems besides adopting a convention on the abolition of slavery. The United Nations and the International Labour Organizations adopted nearly 100 and 150 instruments respectively on different aspects of human rights. This development have made the individual a subject of international law, and as a result, the traditional definition of international law has become no longer valid today. Moreover, the growth and the development of certain international regimes such as humanitarian intervention and international humanitarian law have brought the protection of human rights on agenda of international politics and law. With this development, the process of internationalization of the concept of human rights began. Next is International Bill of Rights. The Charter of the United Nations is another landmark document which makes repeated references of human rights. It considers that the maintenance of international peace, security, cooperation and coordination, among other things, depend on the recognition of observance of human rights. Its preamble states that the people of the United Nations express their determination to reaffirm faith in fundamental human rights, in the dignity and worth of human person, in the equal rights of men and women, and of nation large or small. One of the four purposes of the United Nations is the promotion and encouragement of human rights and freedom for all without distinction as to race, sex, language or religion, which is mentioned in the Article 1. In the Article 55 and 56 of the Charter, the United Nations and its members have pledged to take joint and separate action in cooperation with the United Nations for the achievement of these goals. Since human rights were not defined in the Charter for lack of time and agreement among nations, the task of elaborating them was left to the General Assembly. The General Assembly completed its task by adopting the Universal Declaration of Human Rights on 10 December 1948 by encouraging the civil, political, economic, social and cultural rights. Subsequently, in 1966, the Assembly adopted two UN covenants vis-à-vis the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. The first and the second optional protocol to the ICCPR have also been adopted in 1976 and 1991 respectively. The first protocol provides the individual rights to petition and the second protocol abolishes death penalty. The UDHR and the two covenants together with two optional protocols were popularly referred to as the International Bill of Rights. The UDHR was adopted as a common standard of achievement of all peoples and all nations by the UN General Assembly, though it is non-binding legal instrument which itself is declaratory in nature. It has been considered as a Magna Carta of mankind in the history of human rights. It has not only inspired many domestic legal systems of Afro-Asian states to include a Bill of Rights in their constitutions, but also inspire the regional human rights conventions such as European Conventions of 1950, the Inter-American Conventions of 1969 and the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, that is 1981. The provisions of UDHR was further elaborated in two legally binding international covenants, that is the ICCPR and ICESCR. The ICCPR contains the first generation of human rights such as right to life, liberty and security of persons, freedom from torture, cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment, freedom from slavery, compulsory or forced labor, freedom from arbitrary arrest and detention, right to equality before law, right to fair trial, right to presumption of innocence, freedom from imprisonment for breach of civil obligation, freedom of movement and residence, non-interference in family privacy, home and correspondence, freedom of thought, conscience and religion, freedom of opinion and expression, right of peaceful assembly, freedom of association, right to participate in government and public affairs and access to the public service, protection of religious, cultural and the linguistic minorities. The CEC-UGC contains rights such as right to social security, right to work and choice of work, right to just and favorable condition of work, right to form and join trade unions, right to adequate standard of living, including right to food, right to health, right to education, right to participate in cultural and scientific life, and so on. These rights are also known as the second generation or positive rights. The realization of these rights depends to a large extent on the resources of the states, whereas the realization of the first generation rights depends mostly on sound liberal democratic political system. Conclusion: human rights were earlier believed to cater to the basic needs of man, thereby casting responsibility on the state to look after welfare of the man. Now, human rights are more than the basic needs. Apart from the right to life, human rights prescribe right of liberty and security of a person, protection against torture and other cruel, inhuman and degrading treatment or punishment, protection against arbitrary arrest and detention, the rights of everyone to leave any country, including his own, and return to his country. Human rights are not merely rights, they are values of human beings. Thank you.